MICRORAPTOR, the high-spined lizard. An apex predator, and a good one at that. The tall neural spines running down its back are what create that beautiful scenic silhouette, although their function remains a bit of a mystery to us. I'd love to go to get a closer look at this particular specimen, but I think I'll stay this side of the fence. They have a great sense of smell, so if you ever find yourself trapped in the acrocanthosaur enclosure, and I certainly hope you never do, I don't recommend playing hide and seek. They'll sniff you out before you can clean your trousers. Each side of its upper jaw sports 19 razor-sharp teeth, but I don't recommend getting close enough to count them all. This is an ARCHAEOPTERYX. Its fossil was one of the most important scientific discoveries ever made. Not only was it the first feathered dinosaur found, but we now know its colours were mostly black and white, much like a magpie. In addition to its obvious bird-like traits, it also sported many traditional dinosaur features, such as sharp teeth, a bony tail, and a killing claw, similar to its distant relative, the velociraptor. Its name means ancient wing, not to be confused with the similarly named Paleozoic tree ARCHAEOPTERYX, which means ancient fern. The distinction, of course, is quite important. Now, I've seen skeletons of ARGENTINOSAURUS before, but nothing can prepare you for the sheer immensity of this dinosaur in the flesh. A single vertebrae from the back of this animal could be over 1.5 meters tall. Hatchlings are absolutely puny by comparison. Without the protection of enormity, young ARGENTINOSAURUS are extremely vulnerable, so adults compensate by having as many babies as possible to increase the chances that one of them will reach adulthood. Quantity over quality. These titanic sauropods, fittingly called titanosaurs, grow rapidly. Once they reach a certain size, they're virtually untouchable and have nothing to fear from puny apex predators. Hungry guests, though, let's hope we don't find out. Look at the size of this magnificent animal. The way it moves about, with the grace fit for a giant. It's a real privilege to be able to cherish these beautiful creatures. You can't get a much more classic dinosaur than Brachiosaurus. Brachiosaurus is a sauropod, a type of herbivorous dinosaur with a tiny head at the end of a long neck. The largest animals to ever walk on land were sauropods, but not all of them were so gargantuan. For instance, Europasaurus grew just over 6 meters long, which, to be fair, is still very large. This is the iconic high-browsing sauropod, feeding on nutritious leaves and branches way up in the trees. These beautiful creatures can eat around 400 kilograms per day, so I better go check to see if our latest food delivery arrived on time. If not, we might have a bit of a problem. There it is, CAMARASAURUS, the star of the Morrison Formation. Don't let its peculiar mouth scare you. The long chisel-like teeth may look like a carnivore's, but they are actually much better adapted to rip coarse leaves from tree branches. Although, to be fair, we haven't really put the theory to the test. Fossils of CAMARASAURUS are some of the most common remains found in the Morrison. Luckily for us, that means we have a wealth of information to work with, including what it ate and even how it laid its eggs. One of the reasons this animal is so common in the fossil record is the sturdiness of its blunt skull. Looking at it more closely, I can sort of see how that could be the case. Wouldn't you agree? The woolly rhino, or COELODONTA, is a relative to the modern-day Sumatran rhino. Much like its contemporary, the woolly mammoth, This rhino inhabited what is now called the Mammoth Steppe, a vast cold grassland that extended from Western Europe to the most remote corners of Siberia. By bringing this animal back to life, we honour that wonderfully diverse ecosystem, now lost to the ages. Not unlike modern species, this rhinoceros sports two horns on its face. A key difference to note, however, is its unusual flattened shape. That's truly unique among its peers. Our ancient ancestors were very familiar with these beasts and illustrated them in cave paintings on several occasions. It's not hard to see why. They're remarkably handsome, don't you think? COELOPHYSIS is without a doubt the most iconic dinosaur of the Triassic period. Just like how many Hollywood icons have left their handprints behind in concrete at the famous Chinese theatre, many fossilised footprints known as grelata have been attributed to COELOPHYSIS. It must have been quite a celebrity back in the day. It's almost certain that it's also the trickiest dinosaur name to say. If you ever have some time on your hands, I recommend listening to the visitors try to sound out its name. COELOPHYSIS never fails to make me smile. It was named all the way back in 1889, making the genus well over 100 years old. That's nothing compared to the actual age of the animal, of course. The most recent specimens of COELOPHYSIS are roughly 200 million years old. Now this is an interesting fellow. This dinosaur is called DINOSAURUS, a name meaning horrible hand. First discovered as a giant pair of arms, we now know that DINOSAURUS resembled a huge humpbacked goose roaming the marshy wetlands of prehistoric Mongolia. Its hands aren't actually horrible, mind you. Calling dinosaurs things like terrible or horrible is a trend that goes all the way back to Sir Richard Owen, who first coined the term dinosaur, which of course means terrible lizard. Although it may look intimidating, this animal's diet primarily consisted of fish and plants. A real connoisseur, don't you think? DILOPHOSAURUS is such a gorgeous creature. Those graceful notched jaws can pack a powerful bite. But watch out for those arms. Their length and mobility make it all too easy for DILOPHOSAURUS to bring prey straight to its mouth. So if the teeth don't catch up, its arms just might. Some paleontologists think the grasping claws and shape of its jaws made it well suited to hunting fish. Others argue that it was built for more terrestrial prey. In my experience, the distinction between surf and turf doesn't matter. They'll eat anything they can get their hands on. With its magnificent double crest and that noticeable notch in its jaw, it's one of the most recognisable predators to ever live. I'll never understand the guests who think it isn't cool enough as it is. Fancy frills and baubles would only take away from such a beautiful but deadly creature. A Dryosaurus. They originally inhabited forested areas of the late Jurassic, with their name literally translating to tree lizard. I wonder if they bark. Only juvenile specimens of these dinosaurs have been found in the fossil record, so I'm eager to see how much larger this one will get. Quite elegant, don't you think? They're especially cute as babies when they have big eyes and stubby noses, just like a puppy. Found all over Western North America, EDMONTOSAURUS is the textbook definition of a hadrosaur. Although it doesn't have a magnificent bony crest like its more famous relatives, some EDMONTOSAURUS sport their own flashy headgear in the form of a comb made entirely from soft tissue. They're one of the most well-studied animals in the fossil record, providing us with a wealth of insight into how they ate, socialised and survived. Hadrosaurs are commonly referred to as duck-billed dinosaurs. But don't let that catchy moniker fool you. These dinosaurs lived on land, not in water. IGUANODON, one of the first dinosaurs to be formally named. This creature's restorations weren't always perfect, though. See those thumb spikes? They were once thought to be nasal horns, sort of like an iguana's. Very wrong, of course, but A+ for name inspiration. Iguanodon is also one of the first dinosaurs to be sculpted. The original sculptures can still be seen in Crystal Palace Park in London. The artist behind the sculptures, Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins, famously hosted an 8-course dinner inside one of the incomplete sculptures on New Year's Eve, 1853. How's that for a party? Reconstructions of this animal have changed dramatically over the years, from a giant rhinoceros-like reptilian beast to the beautiful animal you see before you now. It really makes you wonder, what will paleontologists discover next to fundamentally change the way we view other dinosaurs? LAMBEOSAURUS, a crested hadrosaur from the late Cretaceous. Hadrosaurs are commonly called duck-billed dinosaurs, after the toothless beak at the front of their mouths. But they aren't completely toothless. Behind the beak are dense concentrations of teeth that are continually replaced, sort of like a shark. If sharks were cows, that is. Like others of its kind, it uses its unique hatchet-shaped crest as a sort of resonating chamber. Though not essential, it's also great at giving a thumbs up. In my opinion, the most interesting thing about hadrosaurs isn't the presence or absence of a crest, but the way they move. They're able to walk as bipeds or quadrupeds as the situation demands, a rare feature in the animal kingdom. At last, the woolly mammoth, ruler of the Ice Age, then ruler of none. There's nothing quite like it on the planet today. Just like their closest elephant cousins, mammoths are highly social, forming large family groups led by matriarchs. So that means we need to make sure we give them enough company. I would hate to see them feel lonely. These majestic elephants are beautifully adapted for cold environments. Their key adaptations are small ears and a thick coat of fur. It's imperative we give them the best acclimation possible, or else we might have to give the herd a haircut. It's not going to be easy caring for these elephants, but luckily there's a lot of research we can reference as we try to keep them fit and healthy. They represent so much of what we've set out to do, so we can't disappoint the world now. This handsome little fella is one of my personal favourites, the MICRORAPTOR. I've always wanted to hand feed one, but I don't want to chance one of these feisty creatures mistaking my finger for a tasty lizard. Actually, I just need my old falconry gloves. Those tufts on its hind legs are not stylish trousers, they're actually flight feathers. With 4 wings full of delicate but vital flight feathers, these creatures have to be careful not to drag them on the ground and cause permanent damage. That beautiful iridescent colour of its feathers isn't actually pigment. It's a structural colour, which means that the structure of the feather itself reflects light in such a way that it's perceived as a colour. Hummingbirds do the same thing today. Wow! Look at the horns on that one. This must be NASUTOCERATOPS, a ceratopsian best identified by its large cow-like features. Much like a rhino or, well, a cow, its horns are sheathed in keratin, the same material that makes up scales, feathers, fingernails and even hair. That huge head can grow 1.5 meters long from tip to tip. That's 1/3 of its body length. This massive creature weighs approximately 1.5 tons. To put that into perspective, a mature Spanish fighting bull can weigh up to 0.7 tons. Imagine setting that loose on the streets of Pamplona in Spain. Ah, a PACHYRHINOSAURUS. My, that head looks heavy. Thankfully, the frill extending off the back of its head is hiding a secret. There are two large holes punched straight through the bone to relieve the weight of all those adornments. The holes aren't visible during life. As you can see, they're beneath all that skin and keratin. I've been told that these dinosaurs are quite bossy. Instead of a nasal horn, Pachyrhinosaurus sports an overgrown mass of bone called a nasal boss above its eyes and nose. It certainly lives up to its name, the thick-nosed lizard. There are 3 species contained within the genus Pachyrhinosaurus, each with their own unique facial characteristics. Paraceratherium may look totally alien at first. You'll notice the resemblance to its modern relative, the rhinoceros. The face of Paraceratherium still shares many features with them. Particularly noteworthy is that triangular upper lip, a prehensile structure that helps them manipulate their food. While a rhinoceros's smile could be considered rather unpleasant, the teeth of Paraceratherium make its smile something to behold. Beneath that long upper lip are 2 sets of tusks that point at odd angles from each jaw, making them look like they seriously need a visit from the dentist. Ever since the extinction of the northern white rhino, people have wondered whether the same technology that revived Paraceratherium could be used for rhino conservation. Unfortunately, such an effort is wasted without diverse genetic material. Low genetic diversity is not so much of a problem for animals that can't be released, like ours, but a wild population of revived rhinos would suffer from a genetic bottleneck. Now that, my friend, is a beautiful dinosaur. Almost like a musical instrument, Parasaurolophus used their crest for long-distance communication. They didn't use their tube-shaped crest as a snorkel, contrary to previous hypotheses. Nevertheless, I quite like the mental image of a Parasaurolophus going snorkeling. The crests are made out of bone riddled with hollow tubes, which help amplify that beautiful singing voice of theirs. You're listening to the first orchestra on Earth. There's been simulations in the past that tried to reconstruct how they could have sounded, but nothing quite compares to the real thing. Protoceratops. This animal is one of the smaller species of ceratopsians, living alongside deadly neighbours like the velociraptor. I guess that's important if you're trying to avoid speedy thieves like velociraptor. Oddly enough, this animal lacks a lot of the more complex facial features seen in larger family members, like a certain 3-horned celebrity. One famous fossil preserves a Protoceratops and a velociraptor locked in battle. I know that look in your eyes. I don't care if it's in the name of science. Don't put the 2 species together. We don't need to deal with another ethics violation. Now this little fella is a Psittacosaurus. Thanks to a number of recent findings, we were able to restore this creature to a high degree of genetic accuracy, right down to the quills and coloration in some of its species. Just looking at its face, you might not realise that this was one of the first ceratopsians. It may lack a frill and forward-projecting horns, but you can still see the resemblance in its strong beak and its cheek horns. Just like other ceratopsians, Psittacosaurus is a herbivore, but its sharp beak and simple jaws are better suited to tough plant material such as nuts or seed. A word of advice though, be wary of that beak. They're a little nippy. It's always a pleasure to run into a fellow Brit so far away from home. Meet Coelodosaurus, an early armoured dinosaur from England and Ireland. The relationship between Coelodosaurus and the other armoured dinosaurs, stegosaurs and ankylosaurs, is the subject of hot debate in the scientific community. It's been well over a century since that discussion started, and we're still not completely sure where this fella fits in. Remarkably, paleontologists have found specimens of every bone in the skeleton of Coelodosaurus. An impressive feat, considering that many dinosaurs are only known from partial or even fragmentary skeletons. The armour pieces on armoured dinosaurs are more accurately called osteoderms, a word that literally means bone skin. Oh boy, that's a big kitty, more commonly known as the saber-toothed tiger. SMILODON makes for a formidable predator. Many of its fossils have been excavated in tar pits, with the most prolific site being La Brea in Los Angeles, California. More than a staggering 166,000 specimens of SMILODON have been found in these sediments alone. What may have been terrible death traps in the past make for great opportunities in the present, as we bring this carnivore back to life. This large feline can gape its mouth to impressive extents, up to 120 degrees, almost twice as much as a lion. I would love to see it in action from a safe distance. Despite the looks, SMILODON isn't closely related to any modern cats. It's more accurately called a MICRORAPTOR. With a head like that, we must be looking at STYRACOSAURUS. STYRACOSAURUS belongs to a group of ceratopsians called centrosaurines, which tend to have longer nasal horns, shorter brow horns and spiny frills. The famous Triceratops, in contrast, belongs to the chasmosaurines, which instead favour longer brow horns and long, simple frills. The fossil record shows a bone bed of what was assumed to be a herd of these animals. But from what I've found, they're far more antisocial than expected, perhaps a result of modern climatic conditions or irregularities in the genome. I'll leave that up for you to decide. The purpose of these gorgeous frills has long vexed paleontologists. Were they primarily for display, temperature regulation, or neck protection? Now that we have one in the flesh, hopefully we can solve this mystery once and for all. Ah yes, the TORVOSAURUS, an apex predator of the Jurassic. As it turns out, there were many apex predators in the Jurassic living alongside TORVOSAURUS. With so many large carnivores in one area competing for the same food, different species must have specialised in different prey. Its sleek profile made it a formidable foe for even the biggest of prey items. If you want my advice, it's best observed from a safe distance. In its heyday, TORVOSAURUS was what zoologists would call a cosmopolitan species. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, that does not mean that this dinosaur enjoys delicious fruity cocktails. Cosmopolitan refers to species with nearly global distribution, just like house mice, ospreys and barn owls today. Triceratops, one of the most recognisable and largest dinosaurs of its kind. Several fossilised Triceratops have been given nicknames, like Lane, Hatcher or Homer. Personally, I prefer names starting with T. Having lived alongside predators like the T.Rex, those giant horns start to make a lot more sense. Now, let's not mix the two together. Just think, this species was completely eradicated in a mass extinction that killed 3/4 of the species on Earth. And 66 million years later, it has the chance to walk the Earth once again. We're witnessing something truly remarkable. There it is, the one and only king of the tyrant lizards. Tyrannosaurus is as big as the movies, and yet somehow even scarier. While your favourite dinosaur movie might have depicted the T-Rex with rather poor vision, brain scans have revealed that its vision rivalled that of modern birds of prey, which means that it's watching you just as much as you're watching it. Eerie stuff. Take a good look at those arms. Each arm is 1 metre long, can hold almost 200 kilos, and ends in razor-sharp claws. Far from the wimpy little stubs most of the public makes them out to be. This is a creature of pure instinct, so let's hope it doesn't try to take back its kingdom anytime soon.